Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all distinguished speakers, moderator, and all participants from all over the world. Welcome to the side event of Task Force 9 T20 Indonesia, enhancing philanthropy's contributions in SDGs blended financing. My name is Ryan, coordinator of Task Force 9 T20 Indonesia, Global Cooperation for SDGs Financing, and I will be the master of ceremony for this event. I would like to share the agenda of this event. Firstly, we will hear opening remarks from Philanthropy Indonesia, continued by keynote speech, remarks from panelists, and then moderated discussion where all participants are welcome to join to ask questions for the panelists by typing the questions via the Q&A feature. Before we begin, I would like to thank Philanthropy Indonesia as one of the partners of Task Force 9 T20 Indonesia for their generous support for this event. Without further ado, to start the event, we will hear the opening remarks from Bapak Rizal Algamar, Chairperson of the Executive Board Philanthropy Indonesia. Pak Rizal Algamar, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Parian, and thank you, everyone. Welcome. A very good morning, afternoon, and evening to you all, depending, of course, on which part of the world you are in. Welcome to the T20 Task Force 9 side event on enhancing philanthropy's contributions in SDGs blended financing. My name is Rizal Algamar. I'm the chair of the Board of Executive of Philanthropy Indonesia. Let us first and foremost welcome our distinguished speakers and moderators who are here with us today. First of all, there will be two keynotes delivered by Professor Bambang Brojonegoro, the lead co-chair of T20 Indonesia. Welcome, sir. And Ibu Erna Witular, member of the advisory board of Philanthropy Indonesia. Welcome also, Ibu. We will also have a really exciting presentation and discussion in the panel discussion. With us today here is Ms. Elizabeth Yee, the Executive Vice President, Program Strategy and Chief of Staff of the Rockefeller Foundations. Ibu Fifi Yulaswati, the head of SDGs National Secretariat from the Ministry of National Planning, Republic of Indonesia, and Bapak Satrio Tanujoyo, CEO of Tanoto Foundation, and last but not least, Professor Kashru, Chairman of the Institute of Policy, Advocacy, and Governance, and co-author Task Force 9 T20 Indonesia. The session will be moderated by Ibu Riatu, the Director, Institute of Economic and Social Research, Faculty of Economics and Business from the University of Indonesia. And to all distinguished participants here with us today, welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, it is such an honor for me to welcome you to today's discussions. Philanthropy Indonesia is a nonprofit and independent association of philanthropies established to advance the philanthropic sector in Indonesia so that it can contribute to the achievement of social justice and sustainable development goals. As we all know, solving complex problems requires collaborations between leaders, governments, not-for-profit organizations, and the corporate world. Philanthropists can be an important catalyst towards solving some of society's most pressing problems by focusing on areas where existing funding isn't enough to make a lasting impact, or in areas that may not be a funding priority for government and businesses. To support its strategic mission, Philanthropy Indonesia has developed a philanthropy hub to serve as a platform for cooperation and exchanges, and as a bridge between foundations and policymakers. Our goal is to mobilize collective action, or gotong royong in our Indonesian culture, and build a strong philanthropic community that encourages the sharing of lessons and best practices, catalyzes philanthropic leadership through co-creation and collaborations, and to support the establishment of innovative financing that will accelerate the achievement of sustainable development goals. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, collective action between government and non-state actors such as business sectors and philanthropy, is crucial to address the financing gap in SDGs implementation. Globally, it is estimated to be about $5 trillion to $7 trillion of financing gap, while in Indonesia, it is estimated to be the financing gap needed to achieve the SDGs is at about 14 trillion rupiah until 2030. And yet, the COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated the financing gap further. However, governments and foundations have often followed parallel paths without engaging in genuine complementary partnership. There is increasing recognition that including foundation more strategically in policy discussions at the global, national, and local levels will help optimize development results. This will require a paradigm shift in how governments approach foundations, embracing them as catalytic partners rather than solely considering them as financiers. Philanthropic organizations can play a critical role in bridging the gap with their catalytic capital. It is our hope today that today's discussion will elaborate how philanthropy plays a crucial role in sustainable development and also to explore how to enhance philanthropy's contributions in the SDGs financing. On behalf of Philanthropy Indonesia, we welcome you to this session and thank you for being part of Task Force 9 events tonight. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Pak Rizal, for opening our event. Next, we will move to the keynote session. I would like to invite Professor Bambang Brojonegoro to deliver his keynote speech. Professor Bambang Brojonegoro is currently the lead co-chair of T20 Indonesia, as well as lead co-chair of Task Force 9 T20 Indonesia. He is a professor of economics at the University of Indonesia, and he also held several positions as the Minister of the Republic of Indonesia, starting as the Minister of Finance from 2015 to 2016, Minister of Development Planning from 2016 to 2019, and Minister of Research and Technology from 2019 to 2021. Professor Brojonegoro, the screen is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Ryan. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. A very good evening, good afternoon, and good morning to everybody wherever you are. Honorable Bapak Rizal Algamar, Chairperson of Philanthropy Indonesia, Honorable Ibu Erna Witular, Advisory Board Member of Philanthropy Indonesia, Honorable Ms. Elizabeth Yee, Vice President, Program Strategy and Chief of Staff to the President's Office, Rockefeller Foundation, Honorable Bapak Satrio Tanujoyo, Global CEO of Tanoto Foundation, Ibu Vivi Yulaswati, Head of Indonesia SDGs National Secretariat of G20 Development Working Group, Professor Syed Munir Kasru, the Institute for Policy, Advocacy, and Governance, and also co-chair of Task Force 9 of T20 Indonesia, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank for participating in this event, and especially to Philanthropy Indonesia for the full support for Task Force 9, and especially for this event. And also thank you, Pak Rizal, for your opening remarks. SDG financial gap is still significant, as we know, reaching $2.5 trillion annually in developing countries. The COVID-19 pandemic has worsened the SDGs financial gap, reaching $2.5 trillion in developing countries and now increasing up to $4.2 trillion annually. The OECD 2020 report also noted that developing countries experienced a decline of $700 billion in external private financing and a gap of almost $1 trillion in public spending on COVID-19 recovery measures compared to what developed countries spend. This gap occurs because developed countries have greater capacity and capability in the economy, both in borrowing and attracting investors. The decline in private financing felt by developing countries was also caused by decreasing foreign direct investment, portfolio investment, and remittances sent by migrant workers. Therefore, providing solution and mechanism through a more updated blended financial scheme is crucial to overcome the SDGs financial gap, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. One strategy that can be applied in encouraging the completion of development financing is through a blended financing scheme. This scheme aims to mobilize private capital flows to projects that contribute to sustainable development while still providing financial return to investors. In this case, decision makers need to develop an attractive SDGs financing ecosystem for private investors. Steps that can be taken to support this effort include strengthening financial institutions to support SDGs financing, creating multilateral platforms and multi-stakeholder partnership, strengthening the role of multilateral development banks in supporting SDGs financing for developing countries, intensifying efforts to increase philanthropic contributions, and developing SDGs debt swap and various other financing instruments. The OECD has established a framework for common values between all stakeholders in achieving SDGs. The 3 Hitakarana Roadmap consists of 5 shared values and guidelines, emphasizing that coordinated action across markets is essential to create effectiveness and efficiency to provide financing and development impacts for realizing the SDGs. The 5 shared values that are important for the 3 Hitakarana Roadmap for blended finance: first, anchor blended finance into the Sustainable Development Goals. Second, commit to using blended finance to mobilize commercial finance. Third, design blended finance to move towards commercial sustainability. Fourth, structure blended finance to build inclusive markets. And fifth, promote transparency when engaging in blended finance. These principles aim to ensure blended finance meets accepted quality standard and achieves impact. One of the aspects in the SDGs blended finance is the role of philanthropic organization, which is topic of our discussion tonight. Philanthropic organization is very essential to act as a catalyst for innovative financing for social impact. Thus, enabling an environment for philanthropy should be created. It can leverage its potential to support development better. The national government should have an open door policy for philanthropy to encourage a more connected and accountable philanthropic sector in the country. In addition, the government must consider philanthropy as a partner, not only as a source of additional SDG funding. This collaboration must go beyond sharing information and good practice to establish a common strategy, unifying resources, and decision-making. There are so many things that we can do in finding the right solution for increasing the contribution of philanthropic organizations toward blended finance. In this context, T20 Indonesia is committed to serve as the independent global ideas bank for the G20 to provide innovative solutions in facing the world's multifaceted problems. We wish our T20 communique embodies the solutions upon the issues that we are facing, as well as become the main recommendation for the G20 presidency. Thank you very much once again for inviting me to this webinar. I wish all the participants can have a fruitful discussion with our prominent panelists. Very good evening, everyone. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Brojonegoro, for such enlightening remarks. Well, unfortunately, Professor Brojonegoro has to leave due to another agenda to attend. Thank you very much for coming, Professor Brojonegoro. And up next, we will have another keynote speech by Ibu Dr. Erna Witular. Dr. Erna Witular is a member of the Advisory Board of Philanthropy Indonesia. She is the former UN Special Ambassador for Millennium Development Goals in Asia Pacific from 2003 to 2007, Indonesian Minister of Human Settlements and Regional Development from 1999 to 2001, and President of Consumers International from 1991 to 1997. She was also a member of the Global Commission on Legal Empowerment of the Poor from 2006 to 2009 and the Commission on Global Security, Justice and Governance from 2014 to 2015. Without further ado, Dr. Erna Witular, the screen is yours.
Good evening. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And may God be with you all. It's an honor for me to be in the middle of this distinguished audience, yeah, and to share what I experienced and I thought about the whole this cooperation for SDGs financing, especially from the perspective of philanthropy. Because philanthropy has been existing for several decades in Indonesia. At the early ages, religious motives was the main driver, but more and more people from different religions mingled in philanthropic organizations, then having more universal and national drive to organize themselves. Regarding the SDGs, the philanthropy organizations have started even more earlier with MDGs since begin year of 2000. As time moves forward, the philanthropy organization became more organized with better governance and better resource mobilization. For mobilizing philanthropic resources for SDGs, there are many, hundreds probably, ways of doing it, but it is important to gain donors and sponsors' trust. We all know that. So I would like to suggest that in cooperation for this SDGs financing, we are developing capacities for better and more transparent and accountable resource mobilization for more participants of the I'm sorry. More participants of the action, and so I think it is very appropriate for all of us now to start this session sooner than later, as we are already late on global cooperation for SDGs financing. Thank you very much for your attention.
All right. Thank you very much, Ibu Dr. Erna Witular, for such great remarks. With the completion of the keynote session, we are now coming to the panelist session, which will be moderated by Dr. Riyatu Mariato Kiptia. Ibu Riyatu is the director of the Institute for Economic and Social Research, Faculty of Economics and Business, University of Indonesia, or well known as LPM, as well as executive co-chair of the T20 Indonesia. Prior to serving as director at LPM, she was an associate director of LPM for research in 2014 and also chair of the undergraduate economics program at Department of Economics, Faculty of Economics and Business, University of Indonesia. Without further ado, over to you, Ibu Riyatu.
Thank you, Rian, for the nice introduction, and very good evening to all of you here. Honorary Bapak Rizal Algamar, from the chairman of Philanthropy Indonesia, Honorary Ibu Erna Witular, Board of Directors Philanthropy Indonesia, and our prominent speakers here, Miss Elizabeth Yi, Ibu Vivi Yuliaswati, Professor Hasru, and Bapak Satrio Tanujoyo from Tanoto Foundation. Thank you very much for joining this discussion, and will share with us. You are all, we have here the speakers that have long experience in the context of philanthropy and also in the context of supporting SDGs. As we will start our discussion, we will have the speakers inside for 30 minutes, and later on the last 30 minutes we will also have the discussion among of us. To start for the discussion here, we will start with Mrs. Elizabeth Yee. I will also read the short bio of Ms. Elizabeth Yee. Elizabeth Yee is the Executive Vice President Program Strategy and Chief of Staff at the Rockefeller Foundation. She oversees the foundation portfolio of global programs and leads the advancement of the foundation's strategic priorities. She joined the Rockefeller Foundation in 2009 as Managing Director, Climate and Resilience. In 2015, Yi joined 100 resilient cities where she held various executive leadership roles, and she is currently visiting fellow at Perry World House and also serves as Co-Impact's Gender Fund Advisory Board. So we have a complete and diverse speakers from the philanthropy, global philanthropy, private and national philanthropy, as well as from the policymakers and from the academia as well. So Ms. He, from your long experience in global philanthropy at Rockefellers, can you share insight in the context of supporting the SDGs, and as also mentioned in the keynote by Prof. Bambang, to how is actually catalyzing and enabling the environment for better cooperation in the context of philanthropy roles. Thank you. Please, Ms. Yi, the screen is yours.
Thank you so much, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone from New York. Honorable Chairman Algamar and Honorable Professor Bambang Broto-Janero and Honorable Erna Wetalar and my fellow panelists, thank you so much for the invitation to join you. It's been wonderful to be part of this process, and it's been really incredible to see the contributions that the T20 has been making to the G20 Indonesia process. I was struck by your comments, Honorable Chairman Algamar, because I completely agree with them. Partnership and collaboration is really, really critical at this moment when we know that our progress and the potential that we need to achieve hang in this balance. And we can meet this moment, I believe, if we actually work together. And you know, over the past 3 years, this community has taken extraordinary steps to respond to COVID-19, and we have a lot more to do to address the divergence that we're seeing between the higher income countries on their way to real recovery and lower income countries that don't have the means to do the same. And so from our perspective, the thing that we must do is really think about and reimagine our current approaches to how we're doing development in the 21st century. And so I thought I'd share a couple of examples with you about how we at the Rockefeller Foundation are using our own resources to make sure that we're catalyzing large-scale investment towards the SDGs, how we're partnering with governments and other actors to use those resources to mobilize collective action. So the first example I wanted to give is an example from 2019 that we've been working on since 2019, I should say, and we've been partnering with the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation to launch the Zero Gap Fund. And that fund deploys patient, risk-tolerant, and flexible capital into impact-driven financial strategies that really boost large-scale private sector investment to advance the SDGs, a place that I know we all collectively realize that we need to mobilize more capital. And so through that fund, we've mobilized about $580 million of private finance towards a really diverse portfolio of high-impact strategies. So that's $32 of private capital mobilization for every $1 of philanthropic funding. And I'll just give you two examples. One One investment was a $4 million commitment to something called the Climate Resilience and Adaptation Finance and Technology Transfer Facility. It's called CRAFT. It's the first commercial private equity fund for climate adaptation, really focused on supporting companies that build community resilience. And so one of its investments is a company called Source. It's a solar energy company. And that investment has reduced 16 tons of greenhouse gases while serving 6,000 people in 48 countries. Another example is a company called Seed Stars, which is the world's first seed stage venture capital fund dedicated to emerging markets. And so along with the Visa Foundation and other partners, we help them close a round of financing that's seeding 100 early stage tech companies across Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia, MENA, and South Asia. And they are working on supporting companies that build solutions for the future of finance that are focused on health, work, or education. So I think as I share those stories with you, I think you can see a couple of key themes. First is a good portion of our zero gap fund investments are geared towards efforts to mitigate and adapt to climate change, because we know that everything we do and everyone we serve is getting affected by climate change right now. And then the second is making sure we're actually scaling new finance products in underserved segments of the climate market. So adaptation and resilience, nature-based solutions, regenerative agriculture. That's where we believe we can help support financial product innovation and give proof points to scale solutions. And I think the other important message here, which I know we've talked about today, is just the importance of collaboration between philanthropy in this instance and the private sector. I think there's also another dimension that we are very focused on, and that's really thinking about how we can address the market failure around project development to make sure that good ideas can get off the ground. And so learning from our work from city leaders and 100 mayors across the globe, we created the Urban Resilience Fund, which is a partnership with Meridian, a global infrastructure private equity fund manager, the UN Capital Development Fund, and we built a blended finance investment vehicle to help fund the preparation and financing of commercially viable critical resilience infrastructure projects in Europe and Africa. And that is what I shared with the professor when we were together in Indonesia. We're working on something and building the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet. And one of the things that we know we need to do there, based upon our work with national governments, is ensure that we have the local currency support to enable capital to flow in developing countries where the existing currencies may limit private sector investment and may limit otherwise the ability for renewable energy developers to actually build projects on the ground. So we know that that is a critical area that we need to continue to work with governments and private sector leaders to drive capital. I'll give you one last example, and the last example is really and the reason why I think this collaboration is so exciting and important, and that is this group that we've formed together with others called the Alliance of Foundations, and it is a group of philanthropies from the global north and the global south that are bringing together our voices, our funding, convening power to really make sure that we advocate for more effective multilateral and cross-sector collaboration to advance the SDGs. And this group, when the Omicron variant was just getting started, this group came together to call on the G7 and the International Monetary Fund to make sure that it prioritized vaccine equity by ensuring that countries in the global south had the means to buy, administer, and quickly produce their own vaccines. And looking forward, one thing this group hopes to do is to co-fund a broad-based advocacy push to just make sure we're creating those financing pathways towards a more green and equitable and more resilient recovery. So I know none of the challenges we face today are simple, and that's why we need to put every tool to work to make sure that we build equitable and sustainable systems that create genuine opportunity for all. So I thank you for inviting us to this conversation and for your foresight and leadership in bringing the philanthropic community together with government actors, the private sector, and other NGOs so that we can achieve a vision that we're all proud of. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Mrs. Elizabeth Yee. You point out on the context of the collective action and the need of that global cooperation, mitigating the market failure of project development, and how is to actually fast tracking the SDGs achievement. Now, complemented to your remark as well, we have here Pak Satrio Tanujoyo, Global CEO from Tanoto Foundation. Dr. Satrio Tanujoyo is the CEO of Tanoto Foundation. He comes to Tanoto Foundation after 35 years of varied work and academic experience. Starting as an engineer, he made his way up to senior executive position in general management, strategy, and human resources. Dr. Satrio has been president and CEO of several leading international companies in Greater China and Japan, Iran and the Middle East and French. Dr. Satrio, from your perspective, from your philanthropy, the Tanoto Foundation, complementing as well from the previous remark by Mrs. Yee, can you also share insight and experience in the context of the philanthropy at the national level, as well as how to engage the private sector, creating the enabling environment to actually increase the role of philanthropy and strengthening the cooperation to other stakeholders as well. Please, Dr. Satrio.
Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, everywhere you are. Okay, Ibu Erna, thank you very much. Pak Bambang, who already left, so thank you very much, and also all my fellow panelists. Pak Rizal, thank you very much for inviting Tanoto Foundation. Also, let me start by just saying a few words about Tanoto Foundation, and then I want to talk about three things. Number one is about how Tanoto Foundation involved in SDG and how we streamline our program with SDG. Number two is how Tanoto Foundation gave some examples, like Elizabeth before, about how the funding from philanthropy becomes the catalytic factor of the funding of a project. And number three, if you allow me, is I want to talk about the partnership and how we can learn together. So Tanoto Foundation was established or founded by Bapak and Ibu Tanoto about 41 years ago now, in 1981. Again, we focus in education. That means from the very early education, 0 years old or even minus 9 months, until the tertiary education and beyond. That means up to the civil servant leadership. That also includes Sdg Academy Indonesia later that I want to touch about. And in Tanoto Foundation, since the year 2017-18, we aligned our program with SDG goals. I give you one example or two examples. Our program in the early childhood education and development, we aligned that with the SDG goals of 2 and 4, and all our programs actually align with SDG, the so-called SDG 17, which basically is the partnership. By doing so, actually, we do not start from a vacuum. It is a complementary and supportive of the government priorities. That our involvement in SDG actually started in 2016. SDG was given birth in 2015. That Ibu Erna already mentioned that earlier. That's following the MDG. 2015 it started. In 2016, February 2016, we worked together with our partner UNDP to localize SDG, in particular in the province called Riau in Sumatra. That's where we work together with UNDP. And how does it work? What did we do? Well, we created a pilot program. And finally, we came up with a policy development and institutional strengthening. And then also, with the waste management in Pekanbaru today is really born from this localizing SDG in Riau, and some other things, including the capacity building and knowledge sharing in the province. So how does it work? That basically means that we're working together with UNDP. Philanthropy money or philanthropy funding becomes a catalyst, because then it mobilizes the financing from the different parties, including the companies, the private sectors, and also even the government. So that links to my second point about how philanthropy funding can be catalytic. You know that the challenge is always the risk. For public and for private, the challenge is always the risk. And in this way, the philanthropy can take a little bit more risk because of different profile. So therefore, in our program, I gave you one example, is in stunting reduction. Stunting reduction, you know, Indonesia, for those who do not know, I guess everybody knows, Indonesia suffered very high stunting rate. In 2013 was 37.2%. And then it went down, and today, you know, thank God, today we are at 24.4%. But that is still very high. It's 1 out of 4 children below 5, or balita, they were stunting. That's just too many. To me, 1 stunted boy or girl is 1 too many. So then Tanoto Foundation got really very involved in this stunting reduction with the government. So what did we do then? Well, we always base our work on evidence and impact. That means that we are looking for what is the impact then? Oh, well, we cannot create any other impact or any other measurement of impact except that we, like what I said before, support and complement the government, which the goal was below 20. And Pak Jokowi just also mentioned that we have to reach 14% by the year 2024. So that becomes our, if you want, our goal, if you wish, right? Our ambition to achieve that. So we work together. And as you know, that the World Bank gave a loan to Indonesia with $400 million with the program called INE. But to operationalize the loan, World Bank needs the multi-donor trust fund to really operationalize the loan, because the loan is based on achievement. Then Tanoto Foundation became a founding member of the multi-donor trust fund with a $2 million investment. But resulting from that, actually, then we also invite Melinda and Bill Gates Foundation to join force. And then after that, the Development Bank of Germany also joined forces. And then further than that, Melinda and Melinda Gates Foundation even added more, etc. But that's only from the funding from the different philanthropic bodies. But more than that, it is really able to operationalize the 400 million loan. And further than that, actually, it liberates the funding from the government, which is from 2019 to 2024 for stunting itself is about $3.8 billion US. So that's just one example of how the funding from the foundation or from the philanthropy can become very much catalytic. Another program that we have is also not yet announced, but I guess I can touch here a little bit, is that we are also working together with USAID and to liberate the funding from different sources. We then also work together within Indonesia. We convene together with Aman Mineral, with Yayasan Bakti Barito, and also with Yayasan Bakti BCA to really work together and to create some sort of a consortium, if you wish, and working together with the government, which is very important partner, which is BKKBN in this sense. So that's a couple of examples that I would like to share with you. Now, I would like to come to the third party, which is actually the partnership and how we can really increase our capacity. Working with the World Bank, working with UNICEF, working together with UNDP, international organizations, with Bill and Melinda Gates Foundations, it really enriches us to learn from them. And I hope we also contribute some learning for them too. And this is where the learning or the capacity building really takes place for everybody. Now, you know that together with UNDP, we created the Sdg Academy Indonesia. This is also a joint effort, a partnership with Bappenas. So it's Bappenas, UNDP, and Tanoto Foundation. And this is the platform where we increase the capacity of the government officers and also from the private sectors, mostly for the government officers, to really go into SDG champions, to become SDG champions. And this is really what we do with the Sdg Academy Indonesia. And because of the pandemic, the launch was delayed until March 2021. But until now, I think we have produced more than 100, around 100 champions already, but then more than 4,000 or 5,000 from the mobile learning. So that's what we do in Tanoto Foundation. Thank you very much, Rian. Ibu Riastu.
Thank you, Pak Satrio, sharing with us on the context of the partnership with between the private sectors as well as with NDBs as well. So now we have here Ibu Vivi Yulaswati. Malam, Ibu Vivi.
Malam.
Thank you for joining. Ibu Vivi Sulaswati is head of Indonesia SDGs National Secretariat and G20 Development Working Group. She is currently head of the SDGs National Secretariat, Ministry of National Development Planning, Republic of Indonesia. She is also a senior advisor to the Minister of National Development Planning for Social Affairs and Poverty Reduction, with main responsibilities to do analysis and advise the Minister on social and poverty reduction related issues and strategies. First of all, I would like to thank Ibu Vivi. I think this is not the first time you are supporting T20 activities, and currently is the Task Force 9 discussion, as you are also the G20 Development Working Group and head of the National SDGs National Secretariat. Maybe you can share with us on the context of the National Secretariat of SDGs and the context of what mentioned in the earlier keynote on blended financing and the role of philanthropies. As what I perceive is most of like domestic or countries are still mostly depends on multi-development MDBs in the context of SDGs. How can it also expand it to involve various actors here? Please, Ibu Vivi, thank you.
Thank you very much, Bu Riatu, for the opportunity. Honorable Pak Rizal Algamar, Ibu Erna Witular, Miss Elizabeth Yi, Bapak Satrio Tanujoyo. I just see here Pak Gusman Yahya and other distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor to be part of this important event. Please allow me to share some slides. I hope everybody now could see. Let me put it into slideshow first. Okay, to answer some questions that asked to me, allow me to start with the needs of development financing for the SDGs. Based on the SDGs roadmap, the needs for Indonesian SDGs financing is quite huge. It is estimated costs around 4.75 trillion US dollar. And actually it's now getting bigger due to the COVID pandemic. It's also, if it is based only for the NDC, the nationally determined contributions for goal 13, it costs around $300 billion. So it is very big according to Indonesia. That's why now our effort to bring all the resources to go for supporting the Indonesians in achieving SDGs on time. So the shifting finance here not only mobilizing, but also try to align, because coordinations, integration, alignment is here to be said. And in fact, it's quite complicated. So that's why now we push ourselves to learn and also working together to collaborate to really shift the finance toward the goals by not only mobilize and align, but also like Pak Bambang and other speakers mentioned, how to really increase the economic, social, and environmental impact of the investment. So bringing this stage, bringing us to learn more about the blended finance. And in fact, Indonesia is not alone. There are other countries in the regions, Myanmar, Vietnam and Indonesia is as the top countries in practicing the blended finance in different kind of modalities of blended finance. But many of them, it's about the co-creations. I saw questions about asking whether this type of collaborations or gotong royong is part of the blended finance. So it's about the co-creations to ensuring and applying the principles of the SDGs to ensure no one left behind, inclusivities, and at the end, creating an impact. When we're talking about the philanthropies, actually Indonesia is also growing of the economy of the philanthropies, partly due to we have more complete regulations as well as synergy with the government priorities. Pak Tanoto mentions the collaborations with the SDGs and also the growing digitalizations and cross-border cooperations among the philanthropies. So within 3 years, the last 3 years, Indonesia put itself as a top scorer for World Giving Index. And if we want to learn about the typology of philanthropy, actually it is a growing number of the and also the transformations of the family business from firms or corporate foundation to move forward independent foundations. We could see here, this is coming from Philanthropy Indonesia Outlook, Pak Gusman, Pak Rizal, and it is a maze. I don't know, maybe Pak Tanoto could explain more why it's happened in 2000 till 2009, where the number of the family foundation who transformed to be an independent foundations is growing. I think it's for more independent and also the reason of governance, but it's quite amazing when we see the growing numbers of the foundations to become a philanthropy. We could see some profiling here based on the source of the funding, which shows that many of them coming from the individual donations, family businesses, like Pak Tono already put an example. And actually we could see it's quite varied on the usage, starting from the educations, the economic empowerment, up until to the climate impact, like Missy also mentioned. So we could see here the majority of the philanthropy actually uses the SDGs as the basis of determining of their programs, and a goal or economies, a goal, and following the education and health is quite significant numbers. And later on, there is an increasing trend of the philanthropies also financing the goal 13 and 14, which relates with the climate change and the maritime. This is only shows the example of the faith-based philanthropy in Indonesia. And actually, we could see here in educations, not only in educations and other social activities, but also to improve the quality of life of the communities. To end, there are some notes as a critical enablers that could optimize the role of philanthropy, particularly in Indonesia. First, of course, keep to implement, applying, and nurture the social capital elements using the norms. I think somebody mentioned about the gotong royong, the collaborations that have been rooted quite long in this country. And also developing a strategic partnerships like Pak Tanoto already, Pak Satrio already put an example, improving the professionality of the human resource who handle the philanthropies. It is important to reduce any risk as well as the moral hazard. Using the IT and communications as a catalytic or the way to accelerate accountability, and at the end, the government should provide more ecosystem to grow the philanthropy, starting the regulation, incentives, and also other government or governance in monitoring, and also improving the impact. Thank you. I give it back to Bu Riatu.
Thank you, Ibu Vivi. You have share with us the context of the roadmap to enabling philanthropy ecosystem, and also the type of philanthropy, like religious-based potential in terms of community development. We have here with us as well our last speaker, last panelist. I'm sorry, Professor Khasru. Good evening, Professor. Professor Khasru is also the T20 Task Force 9 co-chair with Professor Bambang Brojonegoro in the T20 Task Force 9. I would read the short bio of Professor Khasru. He is an MBA from the Wharton School of Business, University of Pennsylvania, and he leads the international think tank, Institute for Policy, Advocacy, and Governance, IPAC. He is also a global expert of World Economic Forum, member of SDGs Global Council, Council of Global Problem Solving in Germany, Energy Leaders Forum, Asian Development Bank, and now also serve as the T20 Indonesia Task Force 9 co-chairs, Global Cooperation for SDGs financing. Professor Khasru, you have long experience in advocating policies and the role of think tank in the context of SDGs, and also as you also part of the Task Force 9 co-chairs, maybe you can also share and elaborate from keynote from Bambang on the T20 Task Force 9 recommendation, as well as sharing your insight from your experience. Please, Prof. Khasru.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction, Riatu. It's a pleasure to be with friends and colleagues in the T20 community under the Indonesia G20 presidency. And greetings to all my colleagues joining today in the discussion. His Excellency Rizal Algamar, Professor Bambang have left, but of course then it's Enna Utoler, I hope I'm pronouncing correct, Elizabeth Yee, then Satyo Tanu Jojo, Bibi Yulu Aswati. So it's a pleasure, and the way I would like to do is, as Riatu mentioned, that I'm the co-chair of this task force on SDG, and with Professor Bambang, and also I happen to be co-chair of another task force on digital transformation. So what I'm going to do, given the 7 minutes time we have been told to use, I'll try to share with you a few things on what's happening in the philanthropic landscape recently, and some of the impact that has been happening on the SDG and philanthropy, and some of the recommendations in our task force we have come up to be placed to the leadership of G20 when they meet in Bali in November so that the ecosystem of the philanthropy is a little more friendly, more helpful for the countries where the fund is going. And to do that, I would like to share 2 slides. And Riyadh, I was wondering if you would allow me to share so that I can share the slides. Okay. So I should go. Okay. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. So first, I'll just make you go to some of the recent trends in philanthropy, which are quite interesting. Then in second part, some of the challenges SDG and philanthropy faces. Some of my colleagues already have mentioned that, but I'll just walk through very quickly. And the last part, some of the policy recommendations that we are making for the G20 leadership. Recent trends in philanthropy. What has actually happened during the pandemic, we have seen philanthropy go up. So as opposed to the popular belief, when businesses have been very negatively affected by the lockdowns, normal expectation would have been maybe the funds corporates make available or philanthropies may have gone down. Actually, it's not the case. Rather, people have been quite generous and magnanimous in terms of responding to the immediate needs. First being the healthcare crisis, then we had a lot of people unemployed, and then we had a lot of students out of school, not having internet access, not having access to e-platform. So actually, the Global Philanthropy Index shows philanthropy had gone up in the last 2 years. Just a quick look into the global scenario. Not surprisingly, though, some of the lead philanthropy foundations are in Northern Europe, US, Western Europe. And then if you go down, can you see the bar charts? Is it visible enough? I was just wondering. Okay, great. Then in the lower tier, we have countries from MENA, Latin America, so on and so forth. So North Europe and Oceania, East Asia in philanthropy landscape have been doing quite good. And some of the countries or regions which have fallen behind because of the philanthropy culture in this part of the world, as alluded by some of my previous colleagues, have not always grown very strongly. Now, what are some of the recent challenges? Now, some of the challenges that first is one thing that still has not come into this discussion, which is something I think I should highlight. One of the big challenges philanthropies are facing in this world, because of the changed geopolitical scenario, a lot of polarization happening, populism rising, many of the philanthropies are having difficulty operating in many countries. So political environment is having a direct impact. And in cases where there's a positive change in political environment, we have seen about 80 countries where philanthropy contribution has gone up. And the reverse has happened in countries where either because of the authoritarian nature of the regime or the absence of required coexistence and tolerance, philanthropy has been negatively affected. This is something I think it would be wise for all of us to keep in mind, because philanthropy is a sensitive issue for many countries, and in many, many parts of the world that has been affected in the last few years. COVID, of course, we know that many of the developed countries which have been struggling to manage their own constituencies, their ODF funds have shrunk, which has led to more important role for philanthropies. On the other hand, cross-border philanthropy in many cases have negatively affected fund flows, which at times have ended up hurting many of the developing countries, which ideally should have been on the more receiving end of the philanthropy fund that goes across the world. SDG, as some of my previous colleagues have mentioned, have been quite significantly disrupted. Obviously, health sector was the most badly hit. Then we had SDG 4 education with schools, colleges, universities closed down. Then we also had SDG 8, a decent work and economic growth, which was also affected because of long lockdowns. These combined with some of the regulatory issues we had with philanthropic fund flow between cross-border did have a little bit of negative impact, not only on SDGs, but also on the philanthropy functioning globally. Regulation or lack of regulation both continues to be a problem for the philanthropy landscape. And in many countries, regulations are either not very clear or very rigid or complex. And many instances, we have seen many philanthropies which are well experienced in working with grassroots level local governments have not been able to do that because of the complexity of regulation in many countries. So the ecosystem on which our policy deals with focuses heavily on how the ecosystem needs to be improved for philanthropies to function with the full strength that they deserve to function with. Coordination has been an issue because many instances we have seen that governments, private sector, philanthropy, unfortunately, have not been able to come to the same platform, have engaging stakeholder consultation, which would have helped SDGs. Many of the national SDG agendas, which would have been aligned with the support that philanthropies provide to many developing countries. Without proper alignment, there is always a risk of duplication of resources. There's always a risk that the host government may not always be comfortable, no matter how much benign the philanthropic interests have been. That leads to the last part, the policy recommendation which we have come up with. First is, of course, the institutional reforms, which goes without saying. It's not only a case of developing countries, even when in developed economies we have seen it seems to be the case. So ground level functional policy is very much needed. And to be honest, many of the governments are also skeptical about the roles and motives of philanthropies because in many countries, Western countries, many of the philanthropies are aligned with certain political affiliation, which at times makes the host government a little nervous. So we need to have risk mitigation and control. And to do that, we also need monitoring and evaluation the projects that funded comes to philanthropies. So part of the ecosystem is to build trust, have more accountability, more transparency, the funds that are coming to philanthropy, so that the original intent with which the funds come and the ultimate goals are closely aligned. Philanthropic framework legally is very important, and government is in the driving to seek to take a lead. And one of those recommendations we have made is to have a mapping approach, keeping in mind the unique socioeconomic circumstances of each country. One of the things that will be not very wise thing to do, take a cookie cutter approach, because each country has very unique socioeconomic setup. So many of the legal systems are also different. And what it does, once that system is there, it can help organization and social structures to more vigorously support philanthropies, and that on a more individual level encourages individuals, institutions to chip in more into the philanthropic activities. In the age of internet and fourth industrial revolution, digital platform is very essential to have a solid web-based infrastructure that gives access to database. That is something in our policy brief research we have seen, unfortunately, has been lacking in many of the countries. So we have recommended a joint infrastructure, bringing in the philanthropies, government and private sector, so that data is readily, easily accessible, which funding is going to which SDG, how it aligns with the national development agenda, how it fills in the gap which that particular country may be facing. So make it more well coordinated as opposed to a very silo approach, which at times creates tension between the governments and the philanthropic organizations. Here, the G20, we believe, can play a very positive role because the 20 most powerful economies of the world are in one platform. So cross-country philanthropy funding can get a great boost if the G20 leaders have some policy prescription, which can go much beyond G20 and serve as a guideline for the philanthropic donations. And also many recipient countries can become more comfortable. A classic example is one of the very important G20 countries, India, where we have seen shrinking space in terms of many of the funding that comes in, making things difficult for many of the well-established philanthropists who have been working. India is not a unique case. There are other countries, because India is one of the biggest countries in the world. So at many times, even developing countries in need of fund can also get stuck if the regulatory framework are not made in consultation with all the parties concerned, and which can help avoid some of the later tension and distended growth between the government and philanthropies. And so our emphasis would be that SDG, which continues to be a challenge, as some of my previous speakers have mentioned, there's a yawning gap. Even before the pandemic started, we had a huge $1 trillion gap. With the pandemic, the SDG Agenda 2030 is hanging by the thread. All of us know it will be quite a challenge to meet that target. Between now and then, one of the things we can do is to better manage less resources. And to do that, one of the first preconditions is to build an ecosystem where the government feels comfortable, the philanthropists feel they have the support system needed for them to thrive, there is proper accountability, there is proper data management, access to quality and reliable data, all this come together. So with that, I would like to finish my initial remarks, but I'll be very much looking forward to the panel discussion and hear from my fellow panelists and contributing to the remaining of the session. Thank you so much, Ria.
Thank you, Professor Castro. You mentioned earlier the context, how is actually philanthropy funding has increased for the last 2 years. I think in this context, in the time of this crisis, the collaboration is really apparent from the non-actors governments, and also collaboration with the government sector as well. So here we are opening for discussion and intervention, comments from the participant in this forum. Please, you could raise your hand or question, write your question in the chat box in the QA session. We have here 2 questions. Bapak or Ibu, Miss or Mr. Elias Tampu Bolon? I'm sorry.
Bapak dong.
Bapak ya, oke. Okay. Mr. Elias Tampu Bolon, would you like to share your question here, or okay, I will read your question, or would you like to directly asking the question here? Okay, maybe I will read the question from Mr. Elias Tampu Bolon. Okay. The context here is highest appreciation. The question to the all panelists here, the question is how blended finance of philanthropic funds and government budget can grow the ecosystem on the grassroots level to actually address key challenges of sustainability in remote regions of Indonesia. Maybe we can direct it to all panelists here, as it is not mentioned here. Maybe from Pak Satrio Tanujoyo, you can share or your opinion or your statement, as this is the context of Indonesia, or Ibu Vivi later on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Since you mentioned my name first, so I will try to answer this question, but I would like to welcome the other panelists. I would like to start by saying that nobody can replace the government. That means any sustainable things, any sustainable change that will take place in a region, be it remote or not remote, it has to be taken over by the government. So therefore, I come back to the fact that the funding from the philanthropy is always catalytic. I give you an example. I explained that we work very focused in education. Indonesian education, the PISA test, we are always ranking 3 or 5 from the bottom. So therefore, we would like to increase the capacity of the teachers and also the principals in the areas, in the districts, in the kecamatan, etc. So we work together with the district government. So we say that we have a program about 3 to 4 years to increase the capacity of the teachers and the principals. And we run the program. It's financed by the foundation. But it doesn't mean that no foundation, and nobody can stay forever in one place or 2 places. Nobody. It has to be the government. I keep repeating this whenever I go to the districts. So therefore, what we do is we increase the capacity of the government, also the local government, and we help them on how to really allocate the budget accordingly. Now, the decision at the end of the day is always with the government, with the local government. So therefore, yes, the catalytic funding can come from the foundation or from private even, but to make it sustainable, it always comes back to the capacity of the local government. And also more than the capacity is the commitment from the local government. That's very important. Thank you. Maybe some analysts would like to elaborate, please.
Thank you, Pak Satrio, Ibu Vivi. As this is also mentioned, the policy of government on the context of blended finance.
Yeah, actually, the current or in many cases, the challenges for financing the SDGs now is on the scale and also on some issues on the accountability. We do pipelining for the SDGs related projects and over to investors, but the scale is not in favor for the investors. So the challenge is then how to bring how to diversify source of funding in this kind of projects. In the last mile SDGs projects, that's really a challenge. It is mentioned in the questions on the government budget, and usually the ones that we succeed to have a blended finance is combining the sources with the local government budgets with other sources. In Jambi, for example, the micro hydro projects combining with the zakat, as well as government budget from the Ministry of Energy. In Sumba, that's also combining with the international donors, NGOs, and the local governments. Speaking of the ecosystem, I think now the government preparing the in incremental way. Like I mentioned earlier, we are now thinking and discuss with other ministries on the regulations, incentives, and of course on other accountability things like reportings and how to monitor and so on. Yes, I do hope that all the discussions, including the discussion in T20, could help us with items and also the way and recommendations how to grow the ecosystem for this philanthropy and blended finance for Indonesia, particularly to solve the last mile problems for achieving SDGs.
Thank you, Ibu Vivi. I would like also to read the second question. It might be related on the context of the focus of the financing itself. The second question is from Klaus Mike. I'm sorry, I think the participant microphone is off here, so I will read the question. There is high urgency regarding the climate and finance and biodiversity crisis, and it is important part of the SDGs, and we need all hands on deck how to make those philanthropies and foundations which are not yet active in this field. This is from Klaus Mike, chair of Foundation 20. I think in the context of Indonesia, Foundation 20 also cooperate with the Habibie Center. I think as the first speakers from the Rockefeller, Miss Elizabeth Yee, you mentioned about the context of the, in terms of the climate, addressing the climate change issue of the Rockefeller Foundation. And maybe you can also share and comment it on the question, the first and the second one, both of them.
Sure. Happy to chime in on both. So maybe I'll do the prior question first, and then I will talk about this question that you just asked. I completely agree with Mr. Satrijo. I think we very much work closely with governments to understand their priorities. And I would also add, we also work very closely with the communities to understand their priorities. And that's where I think the value of our neutrality and convening power to bring conversations together, unlikely actors together, to really understand and develop those solutions is a way that I think all foundations can help advance the work against the SDGs. Something special that I think we've done in particular, and I'm going to reference some of the work that we've done in India, but one of the ways that we've tried to help that and help the focus on electrifying communities is actually working to support developers. I think there's been a real interest in electrifying communities and also supporting entrepreneurship and creating industry. And so one of the things that we've done through our Global Energy Alliance work and our overall power and climate work at the foundation is work with renewable energy developers to support them and provide them the concessional capital that they need to be able to deploy projects and scale their businesses. And so I think we've invested about $4.5 million, for example, in a developer called OMC since 2016. And since that time, they've raised about $83 million in equity and commercial debt, which is 13 times more than our investment. And because of that, that's enabled them to actually work in rural communities and deploy renewable mini grids to places that were previously not electrified. So both addressing the SDG around climate, energy access, and also livelihoods. And I think working at those intersections is a special way that we can work and help advance some of these goals as philanthropies. Just further on that, to answer the second question specifically around how do we encourage people to engage and foundations to engage more directly in climate. I think it's from my perspective, it's an imperative. I've been working at this at the foundation for the past decade, and really, I think in order to be able to deliver the impact that we want to have on communities, we need to put climate at the core of what we do, or else all of our investments will not actually be durable and sustainable, as we just talked about. And so for us, thinking about how we can bring actors together to understand their priorities around impact, to think about how we can collaborate together to address those climate issues, I think is the way that we can do that. And that's why we're supportive of opportunities like the T20, like the G20, and also are bringing together our peer foundations in partnership around the Alliance for Foundation, because we can only achieve these goals by working together.
Thank you, Mrs. Yi. Professor Castro,
Yes.
This is another question again. So I think you have more responsibility to answer or commented on the three questions. As different SDGs, I think complemented on the second question. This is from, I'm sorry, it is not stated here. As different SDGs are becoming of greater concern, such as SDGs 13 on climate, there is a need to have a system to prioritize some of the SDGs over others. And if there are different priorities, how can this be communicated to the philanthropies so that the funds can be redirected to the particular SDGs in need? I think Bu Fifi or others can also comment it on this better.
Thank you, Riyadu. The gentleman and lady, whoever has posed the question, the last portion, how can this be communicated to the philanthropies so that funds can be redirected? Well, I'll put it straight to Elizabeth. You're here, so I don't have to go too far. No. Now, to be honest, Elizabeth, since this gentleman or lady has brought it up, one thing I do on his behalf or her behalf, one thing I really have not understood, philanthropies like Rockefeller, Ford, the giants, while you have a lot of good intent, you put a lot of money in countries like South Asia, ASEAN, Africa, climate change, energy transition, are not country-specific issues. These are regional issues. These are global issues. To my knowledge, correct me if I'm wrong, I haven't seen a single philanthropy take a single initiative to bring some regional government stakeholder in the same table and tell them, say ASEAN, say for example, you bring all these 11 countries, 11 climate change minister, you take the lead and tell what you and some of your peers in the philanthropy want to do and how they can support you deliver the goods. So that is one of my questions and regret about philanthropies. Why can't you look beyond one specific country and sector? Why do you always have to come to international events, then tell what you do, rather than initiate the event and make everybody come? Because end of the day, you're putting in money and you're putting in time, resources, you have a lot of good intent. So full respect for that. But the input-output ratio would have been much better had you had made the initiative, not to wait for some G20, T20, G7. You yourself have enough resources to bring some key players. And the issue this gentleman or lady has raised, wanted SDG 13 on climate, I mean, that goes to that whole questions. When you have senior, that also goes to what Mr. Sachizo has mentioned. Governments are something we have to work with, whether we like it or not. So bring the government stakeholder, bring the private sector, and you as a philanthropy have the advantage, you have a neutral goodwill and support fund you bring without any precondition. So Elizabeth, maybe for is a good food for thought. I'm just channelizing, I'm not avoiding the question. I'm channelizing to you that goes back to the whole issue, that how do we prioritize? How do we make sure which SDG over other? Climate change is a big issue. At the same time, anybody who is COVID affected or anybody out of job, climate will be much below down the list in his or her list of priority. That's the reality. I mean, SDG 13 will not take over SDG 4 or SDG 8. So definitely we need to prioritize. And while prioritizing, since we're talking about blended financing, blended means philanthropy also has a role to play. So that means government and philanthropy and private sector, we need to sit across the table, decide which are the priority, which are the government priority, which are the philanthropy priority, and try to find a common link so that the same amount of dollars spent reaches more ends in a way governments feel happy. You philanthropists feel that it's consistent with the overall corporate strategy. You mentioned that you are in the corporate side, you have looked into the Rockefeller. So it's time to come together. And I think I'm glad this gentleman raised this question, that I think is the way forward. We need to speak more, collaborate more, because we have less resources, but more needs. So how do we deal with less resources with more? You become smarter, you become more efficient. I hope that answers. I give a little longer answer than probably what the gentleman lady asked for. But Elizabeth, I got you in because, I mean, at some point you have to, this is about philanthropy. So I can't give this answer when you're sitting in the panel. You may respond to the Elizabeth if you want, of course, as long as Riyati is okay with it.
No, I'm happy to respond to it, and I always like a good discussion. So that's great. You know, I think it's interesting to hear how you framed it, because one of the things that I feel like we have tried to do is actually understand what governments are prioritizing. And so the reason why, for example, we created this Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet, which is actually almost 60 different countries coming together, really prioritizing energy access, is because we actually spoke with a variety of different national governments who were really interested in engaging in energy access and energy transition, as well as private sector actors, as well as the development finance institutions and other people. And we've built, and we're actually creating and looking to create a global community of people who are committed to all of the challenges around energy access and transition, starting from the actual generation all the way down to jobs and entrepreneurship. It's an entire ecosystem that we're looking to try to drive a green revolution around energy against. And so, you know, I think it's interesting to hear you say we need to bring government actors together. And I'm thinking to myself about how we could do that and be even more intentional, because I think one of the things that we have tried to do with intention is actually bring together people and stakeholders around common problems and work together with all of the different actors in the group to try to solve them.
We'll be happy to support you, Elizabeth. We'll be happy to support you. I mean,
That would be great. And I was going to say as well that I really thought your idea of trying to understand the role of philanthropy, and I think one of the special sauce ingredients that we need to figure out more is to not just be, hey, we've got some money that you can use on a concessional basis, that we actually work together to figure out how to use each of our, in the US, we call them superpowers, but how to bring each of our different values and opportunities and special superpowers to the table to actually drive some of this work. One of the things that my colleague is doing actually as part of UNGA coming up is a convening that we call 17 rooms. And that is actually bringing together actors across governments and the private sector, NGOs, and the communities to really look at the SDGs, to think about where are those challenges, what are those solutions that need to be funded, and work together across the individual SDG, but across the SDGs to actually start driving and experimenting on solutions, because I think that's what we can do. We can do risk capital to really try more bold ideas.
Let's walk the talk. I mean, I have no geographic bias, but since we are in this part of the world, we can easily start with South Asia and Asia Pacific, ASEAN. I mean, two very vibrant regions with so many people. So let's walk the talk. Let's bring the ASEAN and South Asia together. Let's start here. I mean, to be honest, all this intellectual exercise means nothing if end of the day, it doesn't change anything on the ground. So I'm sure all of our colleagues in this panel will be happy to join and support you. So you start, you take the lead, we'll be with you. I'm sure all of us will, all of them are in philanthropy, so we're in the same industry. So please go ahead, Elizabeth, take the lead. Riatu, please.
Thank you, Professor Castro, for advocating this context of realizing and SDGs as the overall package here, and also the cross-cutting across the SDGs. Ibu Vivi, maybe you can also give comments on this issue, the context of to prioritize SDGs and how is actually the component itself. Maybe there are also a combination, or we need to also address what is actually the risks and the problems that needs to be prioritized across the 14 priorities. Or please, Ibu.
Speaking of the SDGs, actually, we're also talking about the interlinkages between the targets and indicators. In the Indonesian SDGs roadmap, it was in 2018, it is shown that at least 43 out of 169 targets has an influence, a strong influence to link with other targets. Meaning, if we put a priority, for example, on the targets under goal 4, which is the highest priorities, I mean the highest rank of the priorities, it could drive also to the impact or the achievement of other targets, including the clean water, the gender, and also the poverty. There's only one example that I could remind now. Now we are working to revise the roadmap, so it would also including the assessment or on the interlinkages, which we do hope could provide a better perspective on other targets, particularly in the environment pillar, because last time, due to the limited data, we only focus in the social and economic pillars. While later on, because with the better data for the environment climates, I mean on the environment data, we do also want to see the interlinkages from the targets of the environment. Just today, we launched the INF, the Integrated National Financial Framework, who provide like a framework or an umbrella about what we have. So first is about mapping or landscaping of the financing sources, And then also we assess the challenges as well as the opportunity and the financing strategy. And indeed, it opened up an opportunity for us to expand our capability in innovative finance. Blended finance is only one of it. So it's including also the carbon tax, the blue bond, the green bond, and so on. That's actually, we are now in the process of it. The government has issued the SDGs SDG bond last year, and it's really growing attentions from the investors. So if in the previous time, I mean in last year, we just issues for 500 million euros, so it's around 8.3 trillion. Now we are preparing for 61 trillion. And in fact, there are more and more investors like from Japan who also interest to see the blue bond, the green bonds, and other thematic bonds. So now we are like learning by doing. So developing, but also thinking about how to create a proper ecosystem for that. So yeah, Bu Riatu, I think Indonesia is a growing environment for this innovative financing, including the climate finance.
Thank you, Bu Vivi. So I think the time is now 20:30. So there is still question, maybe from the panelists here. You can also comment it and your closing remark to close this discussion. Also on the follow-up homework for all of us here. Thank you. Professor Kasru, maybe you can start for your close remark, and later Pak Satrio and Mrs. Yi and Ibu Vivi. Thank you.
Thank you, Riyad. No, I think it has been a good discussion. I mean, we have been privileged to have a very good, diverse panel, people who are directly driven the philanthropies, both in Indonesia and also globally, like Rockefeller. And also we have had like the person actually running the SDG funds. I think if I may, sorry, if I may, and one of the things I think we all agree, I'll just say three things I think we all agree. Number one, we all are in realization and agreement that we are going through rather very challenging circumstances. Although we didn't mention, two things are going. Ukraine war, which is having a serious effect on energy prices, food prices, not making SDGs more easy, making it more difficult. And the ripple effect on energy prices, essential food commodities being fed all over the world. Now, secondly, as I said in my remarks, less resource, more needs. So how do you manage that? The basic 101 household rules. You manage better, you manage more efficient. Number three, to achieve the former two, we need to work closely. We need to speak freely, frankly with each other. And also the political dimension. We are not a political platform here, but the reality is government policies, they play a huge role. And for philanthropies and civil society outfits like us, the challenge is how do we find ways to speak to each other, bring to the common platform, and find a common narrative. Because end of the day, all have to work together. These are easier said than done, but every small step leads to that goal. And the goal is how do we take forward the SDG 2030, even under the restraining circumstances. So I think I would leave with a positive note. Let's come together nationally, regionally, locally, and then it gets bigger. G20 is a very important platform. You have 20 big countries in one go. So let's try to make the most of it. Take the recommendation as much as we can to the leadership summit, which happens in November, and hope whatever recommendations we provide, at least some of them get picked up by the leaders and is reflected globally. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Kasru.
I would like to continue with, if I allow me about 2-3 minutes, please, because I did not say anything about the discussion on the prioritizing SDG. I think we should not forget that we have 17 SDGs. It is not one SDG. Otherwise, we would just have one SDG, climate or education or whatever we have. So therefore, we have 17 SDGs. This is covering the life of humanity in a way. So that's one thing. Another thing is that we also have interest of the philanthropist or the philanthropy organization. But another thing that I want to underline here, and I really want to underline, is that nobody has unlimited resources. With the resources we have, therefore, we need to make an impact. If everything we do is too thin, there will be no impact. So the choice of what we want to do, actually, it really depends on many factors. In Tanoto Foundation, we believe that quality education accelerates equal opportunity. Does it mean that we don't care about climate? We do very much, because we address the climate from the education point of view. For example, we operate in China. We also have a forum that we conducted with the NDRC. For example, we also have the seminar together with the universities about the low carbon that we do for international seminar in China and in cooperation with Singapore. So those kind of things, actually, we do it, blended in our principle that we work in the education sector, because we believe quality education accelerates equal opportunity. That's what we are passionate about. We should not forget that Indonesia, there is an unseen problem. I said it before, is the stunting. Stunting people don't see, but stunting, how can you talk about bonus demography when 1 out of 4 children is still stunted? So that is what we don't see, because the problem is unseen, right? Tidak kasat mata. So this is the kind of thing that the choice of the SDGs. I should say that we should not forget we have 17 SDGs. So therefore, we should really combine what we have. And lastly, this is why we need to work together with the government. Philanthropy is always a complementarity. So we give complement and also support the government priorities, and working together through partnership for a more inclusive and more equitable region. That's what I'm calling for. As the G20 theme, we can only recover stronger if we recover together. And like what SDG motto is, that nobody left behind. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Pak Satrio, for very insightful closing remark. Ibu Vivi, please, on the context of your perspective in this discussion, closing.
Yeah. Despite that the blended finance has shown to be an effective approach, like we discussed a lot this time, the blended finance remains a small segment of the global financing for sustainable development landscape. So that's why in G20, the blended finance is become one of the topics that in many groups discuss. It is an intention to make it to scale it up, because we want to really work together to bring all of us work together, like Professor Castro already mentioned. I mean, to ensure no one left behind within less than a decade is almost impossible if we don't work together. We here means not only government, for sure. We are talking about the private entities, philanthropies, and others. And of course, we have to ensure that the least developed countries, the SIDs, is not left behind. So the privates and governments, how to share all the understanding and also bring how to make sure that the blended finance can operate as a market building instruments that really helps to attract commercial or private finance for the SDGs is still a challenge, and I do hope that in many groups of G20 could provide some recommendation for us how to accelerate that we could achieve the SDGs on time. Thank you, Briato.
Thank you, Bu Vivi. And the last, Ms. Yi, please comment on the closing.
Thanks. Thank you for the energetic discussion today. I think it was really stimulating, and I appreciate you inviting us and me in particular. I know that none of the challenges we face today is simple. And I know we're all incredibly frustrated and have been working incredibly hard for the past decades. I think we're facing this crisis of 240 million people in poverty, 50 million children hungry, and we're just out of time as it relates to poverty and climate. So I appreciate the need to disrupt the current system and make sure that we are really accelerating progress. Our mission has really been about making opportunity universal for all. As Mr. Satrijo said, we are focused on doing that in the areas that we work in, and that is in energy access and transition, nutrition security, and health. And so through that, we use our levers of innovative finance and convenings and our communications efforts to do that. And so I'm eager to figure out how to put our talents, our networks, and our work to support you and the region to drive the progress that I think we also desperately need to support the communities that we care so much about. So I wanted to thank you, and I look forward to continuing to partner with all of you to do that.
Yes, thank you. All of you here. This is actually a start of discussion for the next initiative among us. And for the closing remark, Ibu Erna, thank you for the support of Philanthropy Indonesia, for the collaboration with the Task Force 9 T20. Ibu Erna, if you have closing, if you would like to share your closing remark, please. I think it is still mute, Ibu.
Yeah. Okay. What I repeat that. What's this? Okay. That I'm very grateful to all the comments, the participation, and I wish more of my friends, my colleagues, are listening to this, because it's not often there's an opportunity like this passed by the philanthropy organizations. And so I think it's for us also to share whatever we got from this event, to other philanthropy organizations, especially on SDGs financing. I think at least in Indonesia, we need to get more philanthropy groups to increase their capacity to generate resources for SDGs, as well as use the resources for the NGOs or whatever local governments, local groups. So thank you all. I learned so much from all of you, and I think it's been a very interesting experience, and I really appreciate this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ibu, and thank you as well to all of us here, the participants. And this is the end of this discussion over time, but I think this is very exciting for the next collaboration that can be collaborated among us. I over to you, Rian. Thank you. And thank you for Ibu Erna, Pak Satrio, Ibu Vivi, Miss Yi, and as well as Professor Kasru. Thank you very much for sharing your insight and discussion in this area. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Miss Yi, Dr. Tanojo, Dr. Yulia Swati, Professor Kasru, Dr. Erna Witular, and Ibu Riatu, of course, for such enlightening remarks and discussion. Distinguished T20 community, we've heard and hopefully internalized today's session on how to enhance philanthropy's contributions to SDGs blended financing. On behalf of Task Force 9 T20 Indonesia, I would like to thank all of the speakers. Again, Professor Brojonegoro, Dr. Erna Witular, Ms. Elizabeth Yi, Dr. Satrio Tanujoyo, Dr. Vivi Laswati, and Professor Kasru for such enlightening session. I would like to also thank LPM and Philanthropy Indonesia for organizing this event. My name is Ryan, and on the organizing committee's behalf, I would like to thank all attendees for your great enthusiasm and engagement throughout this event. If you are missing the earlier part of today's session, it will be available on LPM YouTube at LPMFEBUI. We thank you all for making time to join us today. Stay safe and healthy, and I wish you all a very good evening from here in Jakarta. Thank you.
Thank you, Rian. Thank you, Pak Rizal. Thank you, Pak Gusman. Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Bye,
everybody.
Thank you,
everybody.
everybody.
Thank you.
Terima kasih.
Bye.
Thank you everyone.
Terima kasih.
Terima kasih.
Terima kasih.